Ooh, well, I had your backside, but you might have been filled with beer by the time I caught you.
Glad that you didn't surround.
Oh, I am too. I think it's mixed.
I think sometimes she thinks we like to have beer, so I finished all the burritos today.
Oh, somewhere. And then I think she also enjoys.
That's the first day.
Yeah. And also she wants to like.
Well, if you look now, they'll ask you how many rugs you have.
Laura, one of the siblings, and it was funny because she'll be 35 in August. But never heard until we went out to dinner with the medical school classmate of Jim's. And they had a daughter the same age as Laura, but then they decided to have another child, so they had a son. And he was a newborn, and we went out to dinner, and the mom was holding him, and she was like, Laura, I have a little bit of water, sister.
What happened? It's like,
She looked at me, she looked at that baby, and she looked at me, and she's like, Mom, I don't ever want one of these. And I said, that's great, because Mom was a boy. Mom is finished.
But you know what I know.
Because for the same reason you said.
No problem.
38.
Yeah, he.
31, 35, 40.
I got some other people in mind.
Well, my sister didn't have her first child, she was like 35. Well, kind of one of those things, it's like, we could have a baby during the whole med school debacle and know that she won't remember any of it. Or we can wait until you actually have a real job, which is 12 years from now.
It's never easy, you know, it might be like this. Especially in this crazy time.
She called me, like, I sent her a note.
You know, if it happens, it doesn't, it's okay.
I think you can go into the fancier area.
Trials and tribulations, something's
That's the way I was like, Mom, that's fine if I don't.
crazy, and I had my nephews already, because my sister.
I didn't even drop down that street.
Time 1 minute, okay.
Yeah.
Happy birthday.
Wow.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're about to get started, so. Get your feet back. Okay, fine, that's fine. I would.
She said, yeah, of course.
Well, it is wonderful to be back here at the Paint Factory, isn't it, in person? So thank you all for coming out. I know it's a little bit challenging to make plans when some things are on again and some things are off again. Our hope, obviously, is that we'll be able to meet in person from here on out because we have a great lineup of programs this year. We did postpone the one from last month about the Murphy Jeffries building to June, so that you have not missed it. It's just been delayed to later in the year. And if you do not have a brochure with the schedule for Preservation Conversations, Shelley and I brought some. They're on the table where you checked in. But again, good evening. Thank you for coming tonight. I am Tricia Blick. I'm the Executive Director of the QQA, and Shelley Stormo is here with me as well. She is our Membership and Events Coordinator. She checked you all in. I think you guys all know her. I would like to say thank you very much to our donors. This is like my Achilles heel, truly. We had it working, didn't we?
You did. I don't know.
So I'm sorry about this, y'all. We're having a hard time getting our slides in advance. get to it. Sorry about that. I wanted to play with it. Thank our donors as well as our corporate and individual members. Because of your support, we're able to make these preservation conversations happen. If you are not a member of the QQA, we invite you to join. The cost is a minimum cost of $35 a year. You can go to quapaw.com to join. If you join at the $100 level or make a $100 contribution, you can get one of these awesome bags. Buildings aren't good because they are old because they are good. So that's one of our tempting items. Before I introduce our speaker, I want to let you know that we'll be taking your questions at the end of the talk. If you are joining us on Zoom or YouTube Live, please type your questions into the chat box, and we will take those at the end of the program. On to tonight's preservation conversation. I am so pleased to introduce tonight's speaker, Justin Helbert. I did not realize until recently, thank you very much, that I actually know Justin. He worked at our house that we bought when we moved to Arkansas, and we figured it out probably 10 years ago. He did some repairs to our guest house. So small world, of course, that we all know that we live in here in Little Rock. Justin grew up in Little Rock, went to Central High School, graduated from UA Little Rock with a bachelor's degree in construction management. He's been working in residential construction since 2007 with a focus on residential remodels. In his time off, he enjoys spending time with his wife and golden retriever and being in the outdoors as much as possible. Last but not least, he didn't put this in there, I did. I wanted to make sure everybody knew that he was awarded the Craftsman of the Year for 2021 at January's Preserve Arkansas Annual Award Program. And this is him receiving his award with Rachel Matthews, the director of Preserve Arkansas, and Hunter Wendell, who is the head of their board. So I'm so pleased to have Justin with us tonight. Thank you. I'll turn it over to you now that Shelley got the remote working. Thank goodness.
I appreciate it.
Yes,
Thank you very much. All right, so thank you for the kind introduction. My name is Justin Elbert. I work with CJ Construction. I'm a co-owner with them. You know, the thing that I think I like most about working on these historic properties is just the history that goes into them. You walk into these homes, and as you're getting into a remodel on them, you're seeing things that you just don't see in construction anymore, period. The craftsmanship, the quality of materials, the thoughtfulness that went into them, it's something that's not there anymore. So, you know, as far as this presentation goes, I don't even know if I'm going to be going in the right direction for what y'all want to hear or anything like that. But, you know, something that I always look for when I walk them into them is going to be the things that are going to make them, you know, feasible for people on into the future. So we can just kind of start, you know, what to look for. And I cheated on y'all. That house is not in Little Rock. That's in Natchez, Mississippi. It's done with. My mom is from Natchez. So, you know, growing up and seeing all these homes when I was younger kind of introduced me into it at an early age. So, all right, so foundations, you know, what the home's built off of. Probably the thing that I see the most when we're going through these older homes is going to be deterioration in the actual mortar on the brick. So most of them are actually on a traditional pier and beam foundation. What I see from the underside of the home is that the actual beam members themselves will be broken on top of those piers. And it's on what's called a half lap, essentially. So it would have an L cut in the beam, and that beam would be sitting on top of that pier. So when you walk into some of these older homes and you're walking through and you might feel a high point, a lot of times what you're seeing there is as that mortar degrades, those beams tend to kick up where that half lap is. So it's something that is easily repaired. Where that deteriorated mortar is underneath on those beams, as you walk through, it can be as bad as where you walk up to it, you can wipe your finger on it and it just powders, which is scary if you think about it. But it's something that can be fixed. So with a little bit of propping up and new mortar work, those piers can be brought back into a condition that can last for another 100 years, easy. A lot of other things that I see underneath these homes, you know, the actual framing members themselves or the beams themselves, you can get underneath there and some of them will have a black hue to them. Oddly enough, some of those have actually been treated with the creosote. So in my opinion, that's something that gives those more longevity. But there's normally a lack of a termite shield on any of those piers or around the actual perimeter of the foundation. So something to think about is making sure that, you know, you're having somebody come out and check that stuff frequently. Again, let's see here, that cracking that can attend in the bricks, something, you know, that I see is as that mortar degrades and those bricks shift, that step cracking can occur. Again, it's something that's easily fixed with a little bit of mortar work or repair. So it's not necessarily something to stress about too much.
Justin, would you like questions as we go along, or should we wait?
I'll take questions now. We can do them at the end. It's either way works for me. It's no big deal. So if you've got one, shoot.
When you talk about beams under these houses, do you see any deterioration from time to time from animals, bugs, weird little things, not other than termites?
You know, yeah, I have seen it where they've been chewed on. Now, whether that might be a rat or something like that that's
I
been
mean
under there.
insects, I mean small like boring.
I have seen boreholes on them as well. You know, boring beetles and boring bees are a real thing. Now, that's not as prevalent for something that I see underneath the house as what I can see on the exterior cladding or facade of some of that lumber. You know, it just depends. The thing that I think is great about that lumber is most of that stuff that's underneath the house that was used for framing. So when I'm talking about these beams, they might be a true 4 inches wide by 10 inches tall. And the wood is so old, it's almost petrified to a point. Trying to drive a nail or put a fastener into that stuff is like trying to hammer something into concrete. It's just amazing. So, you know, in my experience, most everything we see from the underside of the house, unless it's experienced a significant amount of water damage, you know, or there was a leak from the outside to where water's got to that lumber, for the most part, it's normally pristine the deeper you get into the house. So, and I'm kind of just going through, you know, some of the things that are in the home to look for. So, to me, yes.
I'm gonna ask about that. So we looked at a house not too long ago where you go in and you definitely felt that area that you had a raised portion.
Yes.
So that is a red flag, or maybe not, or
I don't want to call it a red flag because, you know, if that lumber is kicked up and it's causing that high spot, a lot of times is you can go in there and shift that masonry back down to where that relaxes, and that high spot will actually come back out. Now, you walk into so many of those homes and everybody talks about putting a marble down and having it roll one way or the other. Again, a lot of that is the houses have been there for a long time. And so when you walk in and you see that high spot, normally to me, I'm going, okay, this is probably right on where a pier is. So when I go under the house, I tend to go under there and pinpoint that spot and try to figure out what's going on. It's all fixed. Most every single last bit of it's something that you see fixed. So, you know, with these homes being as old as they are, most of them probably didn't have electricity when they were built. There was electricity added, and they have all been remodeled at some point. So the things that I always want to go through and look for when I go up in the attic is there still any active old knob and tube wiring that might be in there? The thing that I see that always scares me is where somebody has come in, the covering on that knob and tube is nothing more than cloth, you know, and it's running through the porcelain line. I've seen where they actually cut the cloth back, make a joint with new Romex outside of a box and just wrap electrical tape into that old system. The thing about knob and tube, I mean, it was great for what it was. The cloth on it tends to break down over the years. The scary part about it is if it's up in an attic and you've got things that might end up coming in contact with it or something that might bump it, that's when you end up with the big problems. So, you know, and as far as rewires and things like that, I always like to check the service on the house and make sure that the service is adequate for what they've done as far as any kind of remodel work. Another big thing is, has it been updated with grounding? You know, I go into a ton of them that still have the old 2-slot outlets throughout the house. You want a ground wire in your home, so that's something I tend to look for as well. These are just some pictures of some knob and tube. And again, you know, some of this older lumber, you can see that that's all plaster on lathe. The scary part is right over there where you can see it's actually arced and scorched a little bit.
Rick.
Again, it's just something that you want to be mindful of. Most of them have been worked on, most of them have updated systems. I do still come across some where some of that's still active, so.
When did it go out of style? When did they stop making it?
Goodness, I don't want to say that they were still doing it into the 30s, 40s, because they were, but I think most of that kind of transitioned over a little later, back into the 80s. They started, 70s, 80s, they were using some, aluminum. I think it pretty much ended in 77, somewhere in there. And aluminum too, it gets a bad rap in a way. Aluminum's a great conductor. It carries load just fine. The problem is if it gets overloaded, it gets so hot that it can end up causing issues. So into plumbing systems, again, like most of these homes have been remodeled. So what I tend to see as far as for, a sanitary sewer line is going to be cast iron. I do see PVC that's been updated for stuff that's been remodeled more recently. And copper, lots of copper, obviously. So with the cast iron, the thing that I tend to look for is underneath the house, anywhere where they've got a joint coming in. They used to pack those with oakum and pour lead around them. Are those still holding up, or have they gone bad? And if they have gone bad, where the leak's occurring, has it caused that cast iron to break down even more? A lot of that cast iron pipe is sitting directly on bare earth, so over time, that cast iron starts to rust down. You might have a leak underneath there that you aren't even aware of, especially if there's been like a vapor barrier added. It could just be going on directly underneath it. Some of the other stuff that we run across is, if it has been updated with copper piping, what's going on in that picture right there is a galvanic reaction. So anytime copper comes into contact with another metal that's not copper, it can start to oxidize like that over time, which can create pinhole leaks, things like that. Again, the lumber that's under those homes is amazing, substantial. Water is probably its worst enemy, so that's something that I always try to make it a point to look through. Some other things I've seen, on remodels or when things have been updated back towards the 50s, they were running a whole lot of galvanized service in the houses. The galvanized lines tend to corrode from the inside out over time. I was under one 2 days ago and actually saw some in-service still galvanized lines underneath there. So it's something to be mindful of for certain.
Is that galvanized water or?
Water service line, yes, sir, oddly enough. And it was actually not corroded, it was still in place. And what was weird, it was coming through the foundation. It was actually their service, but it was only about 15 foot worth of galvanized that was still there. Somebody had tied on the opposite end of it, so it was an easy fix. But yes.
On your plumbing,
Yes, sir.
I think it was the 70s, they started using Orangeburg.
Oh, yeah.
Replace that son of a gun. It take too long to get.
Yeah,
Is there still stuff out there with Orangeburg?
100%. So my sewer line on my house over in Hillcrest, Central Arkansas Water came through and did some work, in all their wisdom and glory. I hope nobody here worked for Central Arkansas Water. Decided that because my sewer line ran over where they wanted to run their new service, they would just cut it and then put couplings on and bring it up and over. The sewer doesn't like to go up and over. It likes to go downhill.
Yeah.
So we started backing up. Come to find out, our service from the house at the curb all the way over to where it tied in was Orangeburg. Luckily, on these sewer line replacements, they do still have benefits to where they'll help you out with that. They are making you go back with cast iron on all of it. But again, a cast iron is serviceable for a very long time. It's a great product. So
did they repair it for you?
Central Arkansas Water?
Very
No, it was a fight. It was a big fight. The engineer didn't agree with what we were saying, but again, they cut our discount on the replacement a little bit heavier than they normally would have. So, yes.
I recently unloaded a 1957 house in Hillcrest. And so that could be subject to a lot of this stuff too. This doesn't have to be a 100-year-old
No,
house,
ma'am.
right?
No, this 100% could be going on to anything that's down in Hillcrest.
Okay.
Absolutely. My house in Hillcrest was built in 25, so, yeah.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
I lived on Palm Street And of course, you know, it was a two-story house. But I had a big, huge pine tree in the backyard. And finally, the roots got in the sewer line. The sewer line was clay pipe, and it was 100 years old.
In that clay pipes, it's still out there.
Yeah.
I think that's why they've kind of gone into doing this, help out with the replacement. They don't really want to have to deal with all these breaks in it as they're going. They would rather just have you go ahead and update the service. So, you know, a sewer line replacement can get expensive. The relief that they give you, the benefit that they give you is helpful. It most of the time covers about a quarter of the cost, depending on length. So, all right, so, you know, moving away from the systems that actually kind of make the house work and moving into some of the more fun stuff, you know, flooring and millwork. Most of the homes that you walk through are either going to have an original tongue and groove heart pine floor or a tongue and groove oak flooring. Something that we see a lot is that, you know, those floors have probably been worked on or sanded and finished a lot of times. There's only so much wear area on that flooring. As it progresses down further, what you'll start to do is where the two boards meet up, you'll see the tongue exposed, or you'll have little pieces of the wood that start to flake out. Unfortunately, when they get down to that point, those boards are pretty much no longer salvageable. So the sad part there is that if it's a hard pine floor, old longleaf pine, you're probably gonna have to find somebody that's got reclaimed lumber to be able to go back in with that. They still have a yellow pine flooring, which just, to me, doesn't have that same character, the same coloration. It can be stained out to get close to it, but again, it's not the exact same. So, same thing. Again, so most of the millwork in the house, so much of that has typically been painted over from the original stain. Something that's always fun for me is, you know, when that gets stripped back down and you're getting to see the actual species of lumber or what was underneath all that paintwork. We've uncovered mahogany, so much heart pine, it's not even funny. And we've also come across some really pretty veneers that are underneath there as well. So, as far as...
Can I ask you a question about that too? Like, but you're gonna also find some trim that was intended to be painted as well, right? So when do you make that?
Well,
Or,
yeah, it's again, I think that's kind of personal preference as to what you're wanting to go back through. I always think it's neat to see a lot of that stuff get stripped back down. You make the call once it's down to the bare wood what you want to do with it, you know. So many people like a paint finish, others really like to go back to that more stained look. So the picture on the right there is a traditional tongue and groove. You can see that there's about a 1/4 inch of wear area on the flooring before you get down to the tongue. Over here on the left-hand side, that's the old 1.5-inch strip oak flooring that's getting so hard to get. But you can see where most of that putty's been come back and filled in. They've actually tried to drive nails in there to keep it where those boards don't come apart anymore. I'd love to say that you can salvage that. Unfortunately, when it gets down to that point, the flooring needs to be taken care of. It needs to be replaced. So, of like, kind, and material.
About how many times can you sand the floor and redo it?
So every time that somebody comes in and sands that floor down, they're gonna be taking about, you know, anywhere from a 32nd to a 16th. If the guy's really heavy on the machine, he can go down to an 1/8. So you can imagine that those floors can be sanded on many, many times. The older oak floors, as dense as that oak was, the new stuff that we're getting is nowhere near as dense. I mean, there's floors that we've seen that are 100+ years old that can still take 1 or 2 more sands on them. You know, unfortunately, it's when they get down to that point that you really need to start thinking about, hey, we're gonna have to do something here, you know. All right, so windows. I think the windows in these homes are probably, windows and doors are probably some of my favorite characteristics that we come across. Most of those windows, if they've been painted, have been painted shut. You know, they're not operable. The old natural fiber ropes that control the lead weight for the sashes inside the windows are typically broken off. You know, the exterior of the windows, if they a true putty glaze on it, if it hadn't been taken care of, you know, that's cracked out. The glass can be loose. The glass panels themselves, I mean, they've got so much character to them. You look through it, they've got that natural wave to it. You might have some little bubbles in there that you get to see. The good news is if anything's happened to those panels, there's a company called Restoration Glass. They actually hand blow these panels and reproduce a look that we used to be able to get. They're a little pricey, but you get to go back with the character that the windows originally had. So just some nomenclature on the windows. Where we tend to see the most issues are going to be down there on that bottom sill. The actual muntins on the windows where the putty glaze would go, again, that's something to look at. You normally can walk up to the window if they don't have a storm window on it and look at that putty glaze. And if any cracking is apparent or deterioration, you know that it needs to be redone at that point. The actual rails and stiles on the window, they tend to be in really good shape. These windows typically were made out of a hardwood. And again, they were so dense and so well made that they've stood the test of time. The thing that I think is so amazing about them is that, you know, everybody talks about energy loss in homes with windows and doors and things like that. If these windows, if someone will take the time to go in, weather seal them, actually take care of them, do what they need to do with them, and then just as simple as put like a storm window on the outside of it. They are, at that point, almost as energy efficient as a lot of the products that are out there on the market today. Just having that thermal barrier in there by having another layer of glass, it's creating that pocket. So, I guess really the other thing would be the weighting system in it. You know, the millwork on those windows is done in such a way that there's a pocket behind the width of the millwork that those sashes actually operate with the weight in. Those can be removed. I have never come across one where the weights weren't still in there so far. And with just a little bit of work, they can actually be put back in serviceable working condition. So, all right, wall coverings. Most everything we see is going to be plaster on lathe unless something's been remodeled and somebody's come in and ran sheetrock through the whole thing. Plaster is real quick to let you know if it's got any kind of water issues. Staining will show up almost immediately. If it's been going on for a long time, you almost get like a blistering or a chalking effect. So you get bubbles that pop up, and it almost looks like there's water behind it. The system that it's done on, most of the lathe itself was old split hardwood. So it could be maple, it could be, I've seen cypress. What else have I seen? I've seen oak, I've seen cedar, but they basically were hand split and nailed up. And so when they were hand split, the thickness on that lathe system varied. So you could have plaster on your wall that's anywhere from a half-inch thick up to an inch thick. So, you're talking about something as far as the sound barrier is concerned, it's hard to be beat. It's a great system, and it's actually a lot easier to patch back into than a lot of people think. I would actually prefer patching back into a plaster wall than a sheetrock wall, personally. So, there's some staining on plaster. Again, when that happens, it shows up pretty quick. It's pretty apparent. The blistering is probably one of the first signs. When that water gets back behind there, it'll just kind of bubble up. So, all right, exterior cladding and roofing. Again, on a lot of these homes, you got an exterior masonry facade. Like I was talking about in the beginning, is you want to check all that pointing work that's on the masonry. Obviously, it's a little bit more important if you're wanting to do preservation type work on that masonry to really kind of know what that mixture was, how to get back to the same color, and then also the strikeout on the joint to make sure that everything kind of stays with the character of the home. Traditional wood clap siding, that's basically your lap siding you see on a lot of these homes. Something that I always look for is that if they've got an elevated slab porch on them, is there any shifting or cracking that might be going on in those elevated slab porches? It's something that can be corrected, but it's something that you want to catch early for certain. Slate and tile or clay tile roofs, amazing roofing systems. Slate tile can last 50 plus years. And again, a clay tile roof in our climate is, as long as it's not disturbed too much, 40 to 50, maybe even longer on the lifespan on those. The thing that I always like to do is I'd say on either one of these types of tile roofs, have them inspected pretty frequently. With the amount of wind that we get and the constant freeze thaw and things like that, that's your barrier to the elements. As far as a slate tile roof's concerned, that roof is probably gonna outlast the tar paper that they put underneath it. So when you end up with an issue on your roof, typically it's nothing to do with the actual slate itself. It's that the tar paper has deteriorated so bad that there's an issue and it's allowing the water to come in. So, I mean, still to this day, hands down, probably one of the best roofing products you can get. All right, I don't even know, how's my time? Am I like running under,
You're good,
over?
you're good. It's 6:27, you're in
Okay.
great shape.
Good
You're in
deal.
great shape.
All right, so, basically like I was saying, these homes are built with stuff that we just can no longer get anymore. If it is a material that we can still get, the quality of it is nowhere near of what it would have been back then. So coming into them and being able to give them the care that they need, and the attention that they need, there's no reason that they can't be around for another 100+ years, easy. The pictures that you're seeing right there, sorry, Ann. This is actually Ann and Jim's entryway foyer. This is some new work that we did. So originally, when you walked in, across from the staircase, somebody had actually removed all of that beautiful work. It was no longer there at all. And had the original blueprints for the home, and through some work and some research, we were able to actually reproduce it and put it back into what it was originally supposed to look like.
Beautiful.
So
you milled all that?
all of the actual millwork was done here locally. That's all out of mahogany. Unfortunately, those are true staved columns out of mahogany. I couldn't find anybody local that wanted to tackle it. I actually called some gentlemen out of Heber Springs that I thought might maybe be our best shot of keeping it local, and they turned it down. So those actually ended up coming out from a company in Bend, Oregon. So, but everything else was done here. Any questions?
When you're restoring
Yes,
a home and you are looking for the craftsman for specific,
items.
exactly.
Yes, sir.
How difficult is it to find people in the local?
I consider myself lucky. The guys that we've been working with for a long time. And I've got a lot of faith and trust in their abilities. I think the hardest part on some of that is, like I was saying, sourcing some of the things that you might need. As far as finding trades here or close to Little Rock, I really haven't had that much trouble.
How
At all.
about materials?
Materials.
Can you find the materials? Is there tear downs and storage places?
Yes, sir, there are. I think the hardest thing, well, this is a perfect example. Ann's floors were probably put in somewhere in the 50s. That oak flooring that you're seeing right there was probably no more than, a little bit more than a true 1/4 of an inch when it was installed. So it was a very thin strip oak flooring. Underneath there is the original heart pine floor that somebody has overlaid. But we actually milled that out. So it's white oak. We did a test on it to find out what it was, and then had it milled and reproduced so that we could tie back into it. That's the good thing is I do know some of these gentlemen that have the machinery, to be able to come in and mill and plane some of that stuff out that we would need. So.
I went on a trip one time, and I think it was somewhere in Virginia or whatever.
Yes.
There was a big company called Restoration Hardware. They had all kinds of stuff from way back.
They're still around.
Is it still around?
They're still around, yes, sir. As a matter of fact, she's got some hardware in her house that came from there.
Okay.
So,
They could make anything, or they had one of them.
or they might know somebody that can help you out with it, has been my experience, so.
Justin, tell them about the Venetian plaster.
Oh, yeah. I don't even know, you can probably see it in this picture over here, the reflection that's in the ceiling. There's no overhead lighting in that room, and there's so much natural light that comes through that front lipped arched door that Ann decided she wanted to go with something that might help kind of push that natural light back down. So that's a Venetian plaster finish on that ceiling. It's to a high polish. It's not mirror-like, but you can see reflections in it very well, so.
Justin?
Yes.
Okay, so first off, we gotta have your address in Hillcrest so we can go by and admire.
Yeah.
Which street are you on?
I'm on Monroe.
Okay.
Yes, sir. I'm on Monroe.
Secondly, back to your roofing.
Yes, sir.
Somebody told me about a composite roof they called a permanent roof.
Mm-hmm.
You had tile up there, but that's not what they were talking about.
No, it's not. Those
Slate, pardon me.
composites. Yeah, they do have composite slate roofs now.
What is that?
It's
Artificial.
100% artificial.
Yeah, it's artificial. A lot of it's made from recycled materials.
like milk jugs.
Yeah.
This is old, this is older. This is probably 50, 60, 70 years old.
That was a composite material as well.
Yeah, apparently, it's original to the place, and the place is 60 to 80 years old.
I'd have to go see exactly what you're talking about, because it's
Okay.
not just striking me
That
across the
doesn't
face.
ring a bell to you.
It does.
I mean, it could also be like an asbestos-based material.
Could easily
Because
be.
asbestos made its way into everything, and unfortunately, as dangerous as it was also very durable.
It's
it's-
probably one of the strongest materials you can
Yeah,
have.
it's
I mean,
a-
if
like-
you've got asbestos siding and it's covered up, I mean, you could throw rocks at it and it's gonna hold up. And they did, for a period of time, use it for roofing material. Some of it was a tile type roofing material that they used out of that asbestos. Something that I didn't really touch into about the lead-based paint and asbestos in these homes, but if you've got any of the original old boiler systems or anything like that, a lot of that piping is actually wrapped in asbestos covering. So, abatement is something that you need to be aware of. Most likely, it's going to be there.
But exterior, if it's a roofing material, abatement is not a big problem.
Here's the thing about asbestos. So as long as it sits in place and you're not messing with it, the dangers of it aren't really there. It's when you start tearing into it or creating the powders and fibers get up in the air and you can breathe into them. That's the dangers behind it. So if you've got an asbestos roof or you've got asbestos siding and you've just basically said, okay, I want it off of there, that's when you've got to start dealing with a lot of the abatement stuff. You can roof over some of those products. Would I do it? I'll probably try to steer someone away from it. However, we have run siding over the top of asbestos siding before, just as where, we didn't have to abate it. So we put a sheathing on top of it and then ran siding after that, so.
What about lead paint? Anything before 1978's got lead paint in it. Has that been an issue?
It is. I mean, it's something that you need to take into account. Any of the areas that we work in, especially these older homes, typically one of the first things we do is put down floor protection and plastic walls. If there's gonna be a lot of sanding going on, in Ann's case, a lot of that stuff was stripped. So it was a liquid stripper. And so you aren't really throwing the dust that is the issue with a lot of that lead-based paint. But if you're sanding any of it, you've got to use HEPA-Vax. They recommend wet sand to keep the dust down. And obviously, we always have to come in with a test kit and see what's going on there. But that's something to be mindful of. That, if the home was before, and most of these that we're talking about are in the 70s, there are requirements that you've got to stick to as far as dealing with lead-based paint. So, yes, ma'am.
Yes, how do you waterproof a basement? I have a basement that has mostly dirt,
Yes, ma'am.
and when it rains, I guess the rain comes in through the foundation
Mm,
and floods it.
Yes,
And my
ma'am.
husband has a sump pump. We haven't figured a way to keep it from flooding.
So where the basement
So,
lies,
The sump pump pumps it out after the,
after the fact, it's
Takes
more of a
a while.
preventative measure than
Right.
actually solving the root cause. There's a couple of different ways that they can go about doing it. If the wall, if you know where the moisture's coming through the wall, they can drill and inject the wall. So if it's a poured concrete foundation wall, like an actual solid stem wall, that injectable fluid goes in there, seeks out the cracks, and it'll seal them and help waterproof it. It has a lifespan on it. Probably the best thing that you can do is go to the exterior and deal with the waterproofing on the outside of that wall. So it would deal with digging out, getting down to where that wall starts, and then doing an exterior applied waterproofing system, and then backfilling again to make sure that it's taken care of. So. Yes, sir.
Cracks in the foundation and cracks on the brick exterior, like the step cracking that you showed earlier.
Yes, sir.
At what point does it become a problem that you need to fix?
So it's a brick veneer, so the veneer is essentially your siding on most of these homes. It's different when it's underneath the house and you're talking about one of the actual piers. So unless it's a structural masonry, most of that is cosmetic. If the wall is actually to a point where the step cracking is causing the bricks to start to pull away from themselves, like the actual wall system is shifting, you want to address it. If it's just a simple step crack, that's something that could be ground out and repointed, and obviously you'd want to watch it to see if there's still something else going on. Most all of these homes have some degree of step cracking somewhere, including mine. So, yes, ma'am.
I have a new house, it's 2 years old, and over the winter, I saw some separating from a stairwell.
Yes, ma'am.
Against the wall. My builder said, it'll come back together. Is that true, or should I worry about this?
So, well, to what extent was it separating away from the wall?
Quarter inch.
A quarter of an inch, and was that like on the baseboard? Was it on the stair tread?
It was on the stair tread against the wall.
So it's where the stair tread actually abutted the wall. Is this and like a handrail staircase?
Yes.
On one side, was it the wall that was
Right,
abutted?
the wall the abutted, yeah.
So, this kind of goes back to what we were talking about, quality of materials. The wood that they're cutting, even though it's kiln dried, is getting younger and younger. Is it red oak or white oak? If it's white oak, it's, it probably has not been milled that long ago.
Right.
So what you're gonna run into, wood's hygroscopic, it expels moisture and draws it in with the seasons. So in the wintertime, when you start running the heat a bunch in your house, that wood's gonna shrink.
Shrinking, yeah.
Over several seasons, that wood tends to acclimate and that stops. Is it common? Yes. Is it something that you should probably watch? 100%.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'd keep my eye on it.
I will, thank you.
Yeah, again, the material that we're getting, it's newer, the wood's not of the same quality, and it moves 100%.
So
Yes,
this
ma'am.
exterior work I need to do for my basement, what
Uh-huh.
type of company would I call?
There's several foundation companies here in town. Foundation Pro over there in North Little Rock. I've had really good working relationships with them on some of the stuff they do waterproofing. Something else that you can look into, just depending on where the actual water's coming through. French draining systems or an apron drain might help you out. I'm gonna tell you that if it were me, I'd probably just go to the extent of looking into waterproofing it so that you know it's stopped. I mean, if you go in and do a French drain, essentially what you're trying to do is get the water away from the foundation wall so it doesn't have a chance to seep in. If for whatever reason it was to back up or get overrun, you can be right back in the same position that you were beforehand. So.
Also, I have some plaster coming down in the dining room.
Yes, ma'am.
There's not water seepage, but it's just like crumbling.
So that kind of goes back to the age of the material. So, the lime and things that are in that product over time can start to break down. Depending on the age, there is a lifespan on a lot of this stuff, even though it was done with quality things. The plaster itself could just start to be getting loose and frail and fragile. Or it could be that the lathe itself, that the nails have started to kind of pull away over time and it's got a little bit of sag into it. The more it sags, the more it wants to show like it's crumbling. probably the easiest thing to do, would be have somebody come in and check it out, you know, almost try to come up there and cut out a little section. Or if, is it on a two-story home or a single-story home?
Two-story.
Two-story, is it on the ground
It's
level?
on the ground.
Okay. If it was a single story, you could get up in the attic and take a look from the top side to see what's going on with a lot of that and see if it's actually got some sag. With there being a floor above it, it's gonna be best to work from the underside. So basically come in and take a section out, see what's going on. If the lathe is actually failing, remove the area that it is, put your lathe back up, and then rescreed your plaster. So.
Justin, you spoke of storm windows
Yes,
over
ma'am.
the original old
Yes, ma'am.
windows. I tried to do something like that. I couldn't find anyone that was interested in doing that.
It's getting scarce. So, WeatherTight used to do most of that in Little Rock. And for whatever reason, they decided to get away from it. And I don't really know why. So what I've kind of run into is that if somebody has existing storm windows that need to be worked on, I've got some folks that are willing to do it. If they're wanting new storm windows added to the house, it's like I sit down and have to start making phone calls. Because I hadn't found a single person in state yet that's just like, absolutely, I'm willing to do it.
We do have a couple of sources
Awesome.
for storms that we can share with you.
Good deal.
And we
That'd
can
be
share
great.
with you, I'll send you, we have a couple of sources. Yeah, we've had some installed in our house recently, but then I've also gotten some recommendations from other historic homeowners.
Okay, I'll get that.
I'll share with you.
That'd be great,
Yeah.
because
It's
they're hard-
challenging,
they're
yes,
hard to
yes,
come by.
yes.
And especially somebody
Good
that
one,
does
decent
quality
ones,
work.
yes,
ma'am.
yes.
Yep. Because again, it's, once you have that on there and you've got that thermal break, the energy efficiency goes through the roof. Something I didn't really harp on, but, most of these homes don't have insulation. So if you're gonna end up thinking about getting into them or getting into one, that's something personally that I would highly recommend you look into, you know, adding that into the home. It can be done. It's somewhat intrusive. It's probably better done on the front end when you're purchasing the home than after you've moved in, especially for the walls. But it really adds a lot of benefit to the house.
You can get behind the plaster wall?
Yes, ma'am.
You're living on Jackson.
Shelley, do we have any questions coming in
No?
online?
No. Yes, ma'am.
Jim wants to know if that's Curtis hiding behind.
That is 100% Curtis. Yeah. He's mad at me because I told him he had to take the day off tomorrow. He'll find something to do, I promise. Let me send him down to y'all. Got anything that needs to be done?
So if you were to try to purchase a new home, an older home
Yes,
to
ma'am.
rehab or rental or something, what's the main thing you would look? I would look.
Good, that's an excellent question.
Yeah, I mean, I think I kind of tried to harp on the things for me that if I'm looking to invest in one of these pieces of property, the things that,
But I mean, like, if yourself or your husband is like not handy or anything,
right.
so do you need to get an inspector?
Well, 100%, I would recommend anybody that's looking at buying a home to have a home inspection done. Peace of
Okay,
mind.
so where do you get those people?
Say again?
What, are they prevalent? Cause you said everybody else is.
No,
Well,
yeah,
that makes sense.
there's a list of great home inspectors here in town, and if you need some recommendations on that, talk to me right after the meeting. I can give you some names for certain. You know, a lot of the things that I harped on in the presentation are stuff that's gonna show up on an inspection report. You know, my big thing was when you're going through there, as some of those things are flagged, maybe knowing what they are and what they're talking about.
So do you have a written check
Myself, oh man, that
that
was
you can
just
share?
But I can't. I can definitely send you something. I'd be happy to.
I mean, I'm a paper and pencil kind of pen kind
I
of.
get it. I still file things in paper as well.
But we do know that she uses email, so we can
Right.
send an email check.
Guilty.
Yes.
Very.
Just about air conditioning, central air conditioning in historic homes, are there other, some systems that are more preferred than others, or?
You know, obviously most of that was added. I didn't really get into the HVAC aspect of it. But I can tell you the things that I tend to look for on some of these older homes is condition of ductwork, what the ductwork's wrapped with. And a lot of times what I'll see again is that ductwork in crawl spaces especially is sitting on bare earth. And you can imagine through hot and cold, it starts to break down that metal and you end up with holes and you're just blowing your energy into your crawl space. So, depending on when the system was done, when it was updated, if it hasn't been updated, that is something you want to look at. But it's really kind of case by case. So many of them have been updated, or at least, it's something that most folks have dealt with. Yes, ma'am.
Do you have solutions for heating and cooling a room that, my home has just one livable space room on the second floor,
Yes,
which I think was probably originally a sleeping porch.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not on the AC and heating system at all. Any nice solutions that don't require a horrible window air conditioning unit?
The best system they've got out there, if you don't mind a head cassette or a ceiling cassette, is going to be a mini split. It's called a mini split. And so, yes, ma'am, what you've got is a single line set that comes up to the room. It's got a head unit that acts as a heat pump and or your AC. Where they're great at AC, they excel at heat. It's unbelievable how much heat those things can push out. So again, it's ductless. You don't necessarily have to run any ducts up and into the room. The line set can be hidden. If you don't want it on the outside of your house with a little bit of work, you can actually hide it wherever the actual unit is that's pushing it. So, but they're great for what they are.
And where do I look for that?
Do you have an HVAC company that you use currently?
Yeah.
Any of them will be familiar with that.
All right, so I'm just asking about a mini
A
split.
mini split, yes, ma'am. Mitsubishi, great product.
But Justin, what about heavy insulation in a situation like that? We've had some luck, even in a second
makes a
story,
huge difference.
right under the roof,
Now, if
coming back with really heavy insulation.
insulation makes a world of difference. I mean, talking about energy loss, just a couple of inches in an attic makes a difference. We're technically R38 in our region, which is close to 13 inches is what they call for. But it is night and day difference if you've got an attic that's not insulated to what happens after it's been done. You see the benefit immediately. So as far as your room's concerned, I don't know, is it cut off from any other air-conditioned areas at all?
Yeah, the only, other than the stairwell leading up to it.
And I'm sure you can feel the difference as you go up the stairs. Insulation would benefit. Now, as far as if you're up there and you're using the room, it's something that you're in there regularly, having some sort of air conditioning system or heating system will help. So, but yes, insulation,
Huge.
big difference. Yes, sir.
Are you allowed to pick inspectors that understand what you're doing, or do you have to take what they throw at you? Because, it's just like carpentry. There's craftsmen and there's wood butchers.
You would know. You told me you were in real estate, correct?
Yes.
So, I don't want to just be throwing things. Just like anything, some folks are better than others.
Yes. Definitely, and they understand. I mean, I had people come out and look at an older home. I mean, they tore that thing to pieces. I mean,
Which was driving me insane.
Wait a minute, we're looking at.
Well, and some of them have their little pre-printed out checklists that they go through, and if it's not on there, they're not going to really look at it, But yes, there are some that are better than others. 100%.
But can you?
I'm not going to do that like in person here. If any of y'all want to talk about some names or anything like that, I'd be happy to do
I
that.
understand.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
But actually, George, I have seen several sales contracts where the seller said, you will not use these inspectors.
Well, and
Excluded them, said,
it's funny because there's
these are
some
inspectors we will not accept.
Well, it's because they're so thorough that they've become known as potential deal breakers, which is sad, but
The reason I asked the question is when we sold the house in Hillcrest and moved to Quapaw
Yes, sir.
It cost me $20,000.
Ooh.
Because Rick Kaiser had sold his sold his business to a husband, a son and a mother, and they were just getting into business. And of course, one across the street, I took them comps and couldn't get it.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, but that's why I was asking.
Yes, to answer your question.
Is there a type of insulation? Cause we're trying to put some insulation in an apartment, garage apartment.
Yes, ma'am.
And I was reading up on types of insulation. Do you know which one is best? I couldn't.
You've got several options now. I mean, typically bad insulation is gonna be your standard. Blown-in cellulose is another option, wet pack cellulose. And then so many folks nowadays in newer construction are using expandable foam. They've got closed cell and open cell. Closed cell is gonna give you a better R value for less thickness. It's almost double what open cell is. So, but they also all have their benefits. Closed cell acts as a vapor barrier, so in situations where you aren't wanting moisture pushing in, that's a good closed cell situation. They, for whatever reason, thought it was gonna be a good idea to blow in closed cell on a lot of roofs, and it found out pretty quick that because that moisture was getting trapped between the closed cell and the OSB, it started to deteriorate it. So it's newer. I think there's tons of benefits to it. Is the science 100% done? Everything with construction is building science. There's things that have been proven, and there's things that, the jury's still out on. So in any facet of it, it's good to do your research.
What about a heat pump versus a electric heat pump?
I'm a fan of a furnace.
In front of what?
A gas furnace. Heat pumps are great. When you start having issues with them, you have issues. Again, though, in a situation with a mini split, to be able to do something where you're getting heat without having a duct, it is a heat pump, but it's smaller. It's very efficient. Very efficient. So, anyone else?
I just note that we did have a couple comments. Rachel noted great presentation, and she jumped in on the mini split issue as well that might help you in your sunroom. So it was a good idea. Well, thank you.
Listen, I can't thank y'all enough for bending your ears and listening to me tonight. I appreciate it.
Wait a second, I've got to do my little thing where I'm going to say thank you very much, and I'm going to give him, I asked his cousin what would be a good size, and she said large, and I didn't have a large, and I'm thinking a medium is going to be good for
That'll
you.
work just fine.
And so there you go, we want to give you this, and this is what we've been giving our volunteers, so he has volunteered to help us tonight, so thank you very much. We appreciate it. Talking about historic house, and of course Ann and Jim's house, and several of your houses are very historic, and we have a 1958 house, and we have these issues, right? I mean, it's like,
I don't care when the house was built, it's the joys of being a homeowner. The list is always perpetual, you're gonna have something you're dealing with.
yes, yes.
Anyhow.
Okay, so I just have a couple of closing comments before we leave, but I just wanted to at least share with the audience that's joining us from the field, so they can see what is going on here. So, there we go. So, I know, it's old home week. So our next preservation conversation is going to be on Thursday, April the 14th, and this is our presenter, Eric Fippen, who is a decorative arts our artist. He's a decorative artist, a decorative finishes and interiors, and he has done extensive work at Ann's house and Ann and Jim's house too. I shouldn't leave out Jim. So we hope that you'll be able to join us, and we hope to be here again in person. And we'll do the same thing. If you're not able to be in person, we will be doing it on YouTube and on Zoom. The other thing I want to mention, of course, is we are thrilled that we are going to be having in person the Tour of Homes, 57th Tour of Homes this year. It's going to be in Governor's Mansion District. We have phenomenal houses. There's information on our website, quapaw.com, if you are interested in getting tickets in advance of the tour, which is going to be Mother's Day weekend. We are having a preview party at the two sweet little cottages, the Jones Cottage and the Thompson Fletcher Terry House. at 1300 Broadway. They're right next to Mount Holly Cemetery, and this is the pool area between the two cottages, and that's where we're gonna have our party. We're gonna have music.
Bring your bathing suit.
No, probably not, but David Blick obviously is gonna go swimming on April 1st. Tickets are $35 in advance and $40 at the door, and again, tickets are available at Papa.com. That's all we've got. Thank you all